is a very ecstatic ending, that final moment in the film. So I hope you don't mind if I start with a personal question. Something you said earlier. There's Abbas Kiarostami, the filmmaker, and Abbas Kiarostami, your father. And those two are two very different people in your mind. I know your father through his films, but you know his films through him. I'm curious, when did you first become aware of what he did, that he was a filmmaker? And did that change the way you think of him? And did his profession evolve, the way you thought of him evolve as his career evolved at all? Or were those just two separate things?
If you don't mind, I want to say a couple of things before I start.
Sure, of course.
First of all, I thank you, everybody, for coming here. I have very good memories from UCLA Iranian Film Festival, even though it's my first time here. It goes back to 30 years ago. I was, I think, 19 or 18, my first year in university. And my father left Iran for 2 weeks to come to UCLA Film Festival. I think it was the very first year. It was the first time I had the home to myself for 2 weeks, just me, and it was such a good time. And I always relate that to UCLA Film Festival. Thank you for that.
So he traveled a lot so you could hang out alone.
Yeah. But on a more serious note, I want to start with something. When my father was sick, he was sick for 4 months before he passed away. And through that process, he lost his voice. And once he told my brother that the most difficult thing about this sickness is not the sickness itself, but it's the fact that I've lost my voice and other people have to talk on my behalf. And I always think about that when I come and sit in places like this and talk on his behalf. But thank you for having me here.
We're very happy to have you.
Going back to your question, I believe I was 3 years old the first time I saw my father I saw him on TV in a festival, and he got a prize in Tehran Film Festival back then. And they called him Abbas Kiarostami, and since then I started calling him Abbas Kiarostami Jun. So I think that's the first time I was aware that he was a filmmaker. And of course it changed. It changed throughout the year. I remember the first time that he made a film that I was not at home was Close Up. I was 19, I left home. And he was making that film, and I went on stage, and he was making, but I didn't know the details of the film. And I saw the film when it was finished. And it happened very quickly. That was one of the fastest films that he did. And it was so different from the rest of his films, because before that, all of his films were about kids, about children. That was the first film that he made that was not about children. It felt very different, and it felt it didn't belong to my father. And I told him that I really didn't like the film. And he was surprised. And then now I think it was the best film that he did. I think Close Up is by far his best film. And that has been my relationship with him as well. It has gone through lots of ups and downs, and things changed. And I remember a friend of mine once told me that, he said, when I was a teenager, I thought my parents don't understand anything. Now in my 40s, and I'm surprised at how much they learned the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Because
we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
I asked that question because you did eventually have to take over the completion of this project. But before we get to that, let's go to the beginning of this project. There's so many things, I think, that seem radical about it, like a significant break, but there's a lot of continuity in it. I mean, I think specifically about, we mentioned earlier Colors, which was a film he made in 1976 for children to teach them colors, but it was a series of a montage of objects, a traffic light, a post box, whatever. And so yellow, blue, green through these objects, so that almost feels a little bit like this film in the sense that it's a montage of images. The landscapes of this key period of his career, Taste of Cherry, Where's the Friend's Home, Life and Nothing More. But then we showed a film last year, 76 minutes and 15 seconds with Abbas Kiarostami that, I'm gonna get the director's name correct, Seyfola Samadian's, it was a documentary. And he put together a lot of footage from various points in your father's career, documentary footage of him at work, but most specifically that documentary seems to focus on a photography exhibit that he was putting together. I think it's the Road and Rains exhibit that opened in London. And literally, there's scenes of him in the documentary driving through a wintry street, rolling down the window and taking shots of the nature. And that's the second scene we see here. And I think that exhibit came out in 2009, or at London, it premiered in 2009. So when did this project, do you think this project first started to germinate with him? And how long did it take him to, develop it?
Yeah. So recently, I saw Bread and Alley, which was his first film. Mm-hmm. And then I was surprised at how many of those, it's a short film, 50 minutes. I was surprised at how many of those elements reappeared in his different films. From the dog, you saw him in different films. The old guy, you saw him in different films. In Where's My Friend's Home? Right. In the chorus, the old guy can't hear and has hearing aid. Mm-hmm. That guy is the same way. So you have the little kid that's going through this alley, and you see those alleys in different places. And he himself said many times that these are all stories from my childhood that I keep saying them in different ways, but all these stories are coming from my childhood. That's what he said. So 24 Frames specifically goes back to 7 years ago, 5 years before he passed away. He started playing with the idea he said that you see a picture, and you see a film. He was always interested in the relationship between film and photography. And said photo is just one frame of a longer shot. And said, I'm wondering what happened to painters, because they painted something, but it's just one frame. What happened a few minutes before, and what happened a few minutes after? And so I'm sure that they put some things in the painting that were not there. They removed some of the things that were there. So he said, I'm very much interested in that process. And he tried to make that process. And he made 6, 7 short films like this. But then he decided to switch to his own photography. I believe the first one that he did was the one that you saw here with people standing looking at the Eiffel Tower. Right. And I remember when it's a picture that he took. And when he came back from Paris, and I was looking at that picture, he told me that it was amazing because those people, they were standing there looking at the Eiffel Tower, feeling mesmerized. And they were completely unaware of what was going on around them. And this is what you see here. But then he moved on to things that did not exist. Like a lot of these frames, parts of different frames are coming from different photographies that he did. So he did those things layers and layers and layers. And then some of them he just built them, like the last window that you see, it didn't exist anywhere. It's not coming from a picture. All those things that were built, the tall windows. Right. So it started from the painting, but it went all the way here. The problem that he had was when he was making these frames, and he showed it to people, the reaction was mostly, this is amazing, but we don't know what to do with it. So his producers, people who worked with him for many years, they said, this is great, but we're not going to take it because we don't know what to do with it. This is not a museum piece. This is not we can't have a theatrical release of this. We don't know what to do with it. And at some point, he got a little disappointed. He showed a couple of those frames. The one that you mentioned with the horses and the car, he dedicated that to Martin Scorsese and showed it at the festival. And then he showed that frame and another frame in Toronto a few months before he passed away. I was there for the opening of his photo exhibition, Doors Without Keys, at Aga Khan Museum, and he showed those two of the frames, but the rest of them were not ready. When he passed away, it was an unfinished project that we had to do something about it. But the most difficult thing was finding out how he was thinking and what he was thinking when he was doing this. And it happened throughout 5 years. So my first job was for months, I was talking to people who work with him, or like there's this lady, he was my father's translator, Masume, that she was with my father on many trips. And she heard a lot of stories. And then the guy who did most of these things, Ali Kamali, I talked to a lot of these people to understand how he was thinking. The question was, what would Jesus do? Right. So that's what I had to think, that if I want to change something, what would Jesus do? Right. And it became, believe it or not, became one of my biggest nightmares, literal nightmares. Right. Because I would change something in the evening, at night, I would have a nightmare of my father asking me, why did you do that? Like, how, this is my work, why are you changing it? It was, but then we did this in 3 months. Most of the work that we did on the video part was cleaning up. Some of the frames, they were longer, they were like 6-7 minutes. We had to cut them down to 4.5. Like how we, deciding how to do it. And then we completely did the sound. The sound wasn't there. There were some sketches of the sound. Right. And he picked the music for the sound. So I didn't pick the music. Okay. He picked all those music, but there was no sound. So we had to do the whole sound thing. And so originally he had about 50, close to 50 frames, but then he himself cut them down to 30. Mm-hmm. He finished, not exactly finished, but like he put things together, about 40 of them, right. And then he cut them down to 30, and then we had to pick from those 30. The project was called 24 frames from the beginning. Okay. So we had to pick 24 of them and then finish them, do the sound, and put them together. Like
well, that title, 24 frames, is so evocative. I mean, cinema, basically, 24 frames a second is what produces natural movement. Here we have 24 frames over 2 hours, but each one of them moves in a different way. Was that, I mean, obviously that was a very deliberate choice from his part. This is a sort of, I mean, it's like, it is really a combination of photography and cinema right there in that title.
I think it's a combination of everything that he did. It's a photography and cinema is obvious, but it's also poetry, I think. You know, the amazing thing is, while I was working on this, I had the videos on my iPad, and I would go through them every night, watch some of them, try to find solutions to a few things, try to find the flaws, problems to fix, and all those things. And I realized that it's just like reading poetry before going to bed, for me at least, it was visual poetry. And just like poetry, that sometimes you read a poem and you like some of the lines, but you don't like some of the other lines. Mm-hmm. And you read that poem again a year later, and you find a new line there, as if it didn't exist before, and you relate to that line more. It was my experience with this film, that I went through that, and it's visual poetry, but it's also video installation. So it's everything that he did that came into one thing. That I think this is an amazing ending to all of his creation.
You know, I think you're exactly right, obviously. And I years ago I had read Walking with the Wind, his book of poetry, and I revisited recently to prepare for this conversation.
And Dr. Karimi Hakkak is here. He translated.
Oh, he is. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, he translated one of his books.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm very embarrassed because I went back to read it, and I was struck by how close the poems in that book, which are kind of, from my perspective, short haikus. I was sort of struck by how exactly they resonate with this film. And I'm going to completely butcher the reading, so I'm just going to read it so everybody, but this is just an example of the poems that are in the book that just resonated with me in this film. So I think the very first one in the book is white of a pigeon, erased in white clouds, a snowy day. Another one, the autumn sun shines through the window on the flowers of a carpet, a bee beats its head against the window. I mean, that's almost exactly, we see so many windows, exteriors, and interiors in this film, and we see so many snowy days. I mean, I got the chills reading it. It just felt like such a full circle completion to his kind of career, although it wasn't really intended to be that, obviously.
It wasn't intended, yeah. He, in the last 5 to 10 years, he said many times that he preferred photography over cinema for many reasons, and one of the reasons was he said photography is the only place that you get to tell a story without worrying about time. And this, actually, I had a very interesting conversation with Greg Ellis, who's here today and the day before, about the concept of time. Mm-hmm. And I think you see that here as well, that the concept of time disappears. You just sit there, watch this. Time is not part of it, kind of. Mm-hmm. And you're right, it is his poetry, but also he has two finished series of photography. And it's not exactly photography because there's a lot of computer work in it. That we just showed one of them in Tehran in an exhibition in collaboration with the Louvre. And the other one has not been shown anywhere. I'm talking to different museums to show it. But you see that even some of the visual elements that you see here, they are in those photos. That he put those things. The other series is he mixed Monet's paintings with his own photography, and it's called Monet and Me. And I think it's amazing. I hope you will see it at some point.
I hope we do. And you know, one of the things that I'll just admit, last year we showed Take Me Home, which was a short film, which is it sort of echoes this in the sense that a child has a ball, he walks up the steps to his house and leaves the ball on the front porch. If you didn't see it, I'm just explaining it. And then the ball just rolls down the steps of his house, but then it just keeps bouncing down other steps. And so it's just a ball that just keeps going. This kind of Escher-like series of steps, the ball just keeps bouncing, and at the final step, maybe 6-7 minutes later, the child just picks the ball up and walks it back up to his steps and puts it at the door.
It's 15 minutes later.
Oh, 15 minutes, yes, 15 minutes, yes. Made it shorter in my mind. But
people say 30 minutes because it's so repetitive. Yeah.
But I have to say the first thing I thought when I saw it was Kiarostami and the digital, Kiarostami and visual effects this doesn't work for me. Because so much of what I think about his film, which has been so special to me and so many people, is this unity of time and space, the long takes of so many of his films, and also the openness of the image in terms of its meaning and its resonance. So it's so connected to these long takes. I think of the final scene of Life and Nothing More, where the car is driving up the hill and we just watch it just drive. And so when the digital, you were saying so many of these scenes are composites, layers of images brought together. To me, it felt so jarring that he would be using this kind of technology. But then again, the more I think about it, the more I realize he was very much about revealing the artifice of his own films. I mean, he was always turning the camera back around on itself. Sheeran, which is another film that I sort of connect to this, is basically making us very conscious of, as spectators, watching all these women's faces on screen, watching the movie we see. When did you become aware that he was getting interested? I mean, you have a technological, computer digital background. You're in that field. When did he start becoming interested in these technologies and, as an artist, start applying them?
So let me tell you something that I think he was the master of manipulation. He would manipulate everybody all the time, to the point that I have a very funny story. Godfrey Cheshire. We talked about him. He's a film critic. He's the main person who introduced my father to the American audience. And once they were showing Close Up at MoMA in San Francisco, and I went to see it, Godfrey was talking afterwards, and then he talked about the film, that how this is about bamboozle. The whole film is about bamboozle. And said everything there is staged, everything, even though it's telling you a true story, but everything is staged, and including the court scene. And after the conversation, after the talk, I told Godfrey, I said, Godfrey, you were wrong. I said, what? I said, that everything is remade, but the court scene is real. He said, no, it's not. I said, yes, it is. He said, no, it's not. So we had this conversation. So no, I said, I'm going to call my father. Right. So that night I called my father. I said, Godfrey is saying that this is not real. I mean, that stage. There was a long pause, and I said, Godfrey's right. Even I didn't know it. And for many years, he manipulated everybody about that.
See, I've read whole articles about how he had to ask permission from the judge to film the scenes and get all these...
Parts of it is true.
Okay, right.
But then he remade all the parts that Sabzian talks to the other camera, not the court camera, to talks about feelings. That part didn't happen in the courtroom. Yeah. It's completely different.
You'd never, obviously,
so
know.
Digital, I know the closest film to this film is called Five, that he dedicated to Ozu. Right. And you see part of it in that documentary, 76 minutes, right? So if you watch the film, you see all these dogs walking by, right? You think it's the reality. But then you see the backstage, that how he is getting those dogs to play in his film by giving them food and then forcing them to walk in front of camera and all that. So in many places, like the most famous shot probably in all of his films is Where's My Friend's Home in that scene, the zigzag road,
Right.
that the kid keeps running and there's a tree on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that didn't exist. There was a very tiny tree that he just brought other parts of it, made it a big tree, and then he brought a school, like children from school, for 2 weekends to walk that path and created that path. It didn't exist before. It was just a hill, normal hill.
I have to go sit down and think about this. Changing my whole perspective.
So digital world, going back to your question now, the digital world just gave him the ability to do that easier. And also, like, he started understand. I have to tell you, he didn't understand technology at all. He had a cell phone that he never gave his number to other people because he didn't want people to call him at all. But he didn't know how to use the address book. So he had to punch in the number to call somebody every time. He was that illiterate about technology. At the same time, he knew exactly what he could ask to get. This is how it started, that he would come to my office and he wanted to, because he switched to digital photography early on. And he would come to my office to do some minor manipulations, like things that he did in the lab with his photos. But this is early versions of Photoshop. So he would come sit down next to us and ask, like, can we like change the contrast just in this part, not the whole picture? And we'd say, yeah, it's very easy. So we'd just grab that part and change the contrast. And little by little, he learned that. And then he learned, like, I wish we had a tree here. So he got a tree from another picture and put it there. Yes. So he learned these things little by little, which ended up in this film that you see everything is coming from different place.
I'm going to turn it over to the audience in a bit. I just have one question before we do. So can we talk about the subject matter of the images? There's a recurring, I mean, this very wintry film. I mean, there's obviously lots of scenes of snow and then the animals. There's cows and dogs, but the crows are recurring throughout, which also kind of, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to overplay it, but the wintry scenes, the crows that recur, and the crows have sort of a ominous sort of vibe to them. But can you talk a little bit about nature in this film and why he chose, or why you think he chose these kinds of autumnal or wintry scenes to dominate the film?
And again, I don't know for sure. Right. This is just my guess. Sure. But there are two complete different answers to that question. One answer is he liked nature. He said many times that the reason he started photography was he would go to nature and his friends couldn't come. That's the way he said. He said, I would take pictures as a souvenir for them to see this. Mm-hmm. And you see this in different works, like in his movies, nature always, in different forms, but it is a big part of it. In his installation, even in the installation that you mentioned in London, like trees.
It's an amazing.
It's just trees in a closed room. Said all these trees exist outside, but you don't see them. I bring them inside, then you see them. Mm-hmm.
The trees, he recreates them by taking photographs of trees and printing them out on massive pieces and then rolling them up and putting them inside this space. They look like real trees, but they're all basically artificial. Yeah, it's amazing.
But then in his photography, you see a lot of snow photography. He just likes snow. He has a series, a crow series, in his photography. And all of his photography, they usually took those pictures in like 20 years, 25 years, in span of 20, 25 years, but then he would pick a topic, a subject, and then he would have an exhibition around that subject. Right. So he had snow, like several exhibitions around snow. Mm-hmm. He had crows, he had roads, all those things. That's one side of it. Right. The other side is a lot of things, effects that you see there cover a lot of problems, like all the snow that you see. Like sometimes strategically they would go cover something. Right. And it was easier to have a filter, like fake snow, than sun. It would cover a lot of things. But also there's a thing that behind every single frame that you see here, there's a story. Mm-hmm. I don't know all of them, but like the simple one was that Paris story that I said, that he said he saw those people being mesmerized and just looking at the Eiffel Tower, not being aware of the surrounding. But frame number 13, which is that seagull that gets shot, like you see that first seagulls are flying and then one of them gets shot. And then all the seagulls, they leave. And one seagull comes, sits next to the dead seagull. And then another one comes, sits there for a while. And then after a couple of minutes, seagulls come back. What happened was there was a girl, Hamide. She was like my father's daughter. She always said that this is the daughter I never had. Very close to my father. And she died in a car accident just a year before my father passed away. She passed away in a car accident. And my father got very depressed, and he actually never came out of that depression. And this frame was for Hamide, and said how the life was going on, and then she died, and everybody around us just stopped living for a little while. But then after a few weeks or few months, people got back to normal life. But some of us were sitting there, we could never fly again. This is something that really happened to him. Or frame, I think 11 or 12, the one with Ave Maria. Like that's a clear image, picture that I have from my childhood when I was about 10, that we had a window exactly like that. And at some point, a bird came and made a nest there. And then we would see the bird's eggs, and then all the little birds. So we saw that, and then they would go, and the next day they would come back again. So we saw generations of them. But then when people would come to our home, we would close the curtain, because they would go and look at them, and then it would bother the birds. Right. So that picture that you see there is exactly the picture that I saw. And he loved that Schubert's Ave Maria. So he played that song a lot of time. So that was the music, and that was the image that I have. So all of these things are coming from different stories. Or the one that actually you think that has a lot of a problem with visual effects, that with wolves and a big tree that looks even surreal, and like those wolves, they walk on snow, and you don't see any footsteps. Right. That was a dream that he had. Like it's inspired by, I don't know if it was exactly the same dream, but a huge tree and wolves that wouldn't leave traces on snow. That you feel you feel like maybe there's something wrong, but he had a conversation with Kurosawa once. I read what happened there, and he asks Kurosawa that he tells Kurosawa that once you said that films should be felt, not seen with logic, and Kurosawa says yes. That's exactly what I think we should do. We should feel films. Unfortunately, most people, they watch films and they look for problems, for logic. They should feel it. And Kurosawa says, my painting teacher once told me, you have to look at the world with eyes half closed. That's the only way you get to really feel, get the bigger picture when you see with your eyes half closed. You get the bigger picture and you feel it. And I think this film, you have to watch it with your eyes half closed, as Kurosawa said.
So let's turn it over to the audience. Any questions from the audience? Okay, so we have microphones on either side, so when I call on you, wait for the mic to come up. Let's go, gentlemen, right here.
Thank you for the film. I wanted, first of all, thank you for pursuing his dream and taking care of his film and bringing the film to show us. God bless his soul. When we see the film, he's alive among us. It's very, very nice of you. My question is about the birds. What is the fascination about the birds of with your father? All the frames, there is a bird inside. Most of them, at least.
Let me thank Paul and UCLA and Farhang Foundation, especially, for having the film here. I don't have a good answer to your question. I mean, I have my interpretation, but my interpretation is as good as yours. But I can just tell you that you see a lot of birds in his early on films. There's a film called Solution, or Solution 1. You see a lot of that scene, a lot of birds in that, and you see birds in other films too. So he just liked it. I think he especially liked crows. It was his taste. I'm sure it has something to do with his childhood, that he said at some point. But this is the part of the nature that you get to see. Like some of those windows that you see in the film, they are like our home, our old home's window. Of course, we didn't have that view. You could see another building, but you could see a tree, and a lot of birds would come there. So birds were part of our life somehow. And I told you the other bird that would come, and they made a nest there. So I think it touched him somehow, but I don't have a specific story to tell you, unfortunately.
Another question from the audience. Let's go to the woman way in the back here. Yeah, he's bringing a mic to you, so wait for the mic to come back.
My favorite frames were the last two. I was wondering, you picked the chronology, right, Ahmad?
Not exactly. So we had a collection of 30 frames. I removed 6 of them, but then chronology is the same as we had in those series. So I didn't do that.
So were the last two his choice?
I mean, the very last one is an obvious choice for the last frame. But frame number 23 was frame number 29 in that series that we had. So it was the one before the last one. Like I said, I didn't change the order. I just removed 6 of the frames.
Because it was horrible. Frame 23, the cutting, the seesaw, that sound was like murdering those trees. And I witnessed a murder of a tree behind my home, and I grieve for that tree still to this day. It happened about 6 years ago. And the fact that he chose that as a frame, as like reality of life, like what was being chopped down? What was the metaphor for the tree?
I want to tell you something about his films and the way he looked at cinema. He said that cinema he said, I make half of the films. And if I'm a good filmmaker, the other half should be made in your head. And that's why he said like Hollywood is not art, it's entertainment, because they make everything there. You see everything, there's nothing left for you to think and imagine. And he usually never answered. He said, whatever you think is right. I remember that about Where's My Friend's Home? There were 2 different stories that made us laugh, both sides. One was, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but the kid, there was a little kid that was looking for his friend, and his friend was called Muhammad Reza Nematzadeh. And one interpretation was, this was Muhammad Sallallahu, the Prophet. And that booklet was Quran that he left with us. And this. The other one was, which Muhammad Reza brought us ni'mat, and then he left us, and we could never find him again. And he laughed, and he always laughed and said both interpretations of, if that's what you think, then that's your film, and that's the beauty. I don't want to have one film. I want to have films as many as my viewers. So I can tell you my version of this film, but I cannot not answer that. But I can tell you that, again, there was a beautiful, beautiful garden, a huge garden next to our home. You know, when we bought the place, my father's home, when my father bought that piece of land, my mother stopped talking to my father for about a week because this is the middle of nowhere. And that was Shamroon. But back then it was all like just gardens, different gardens and things. There was no city there. But then they started cutting things down. And now when you want to go to my father's home, you get stuck in traffic for half an hour before you can turn into that alley. So I think that's what happened around us, to me at least. We had a garden like that we could see the trees above the wall, but it was replaced with another home. So that's my interpretation of it.
Cool. Actually, I have to move on to another. I'm sorry. Another question from the audience? Over here. Woman over here. Sorry about that.
Hi. It's a remarkable film. There's so much sensitivity to life in the film, and yet you can tell that there's the orchestration of death on screen for the sake of the film. Can you talk about your father's approach, whether he ever articulated a moral calculation, or whether you've observed sort of a contradiction between the ruthlessness of filmmaking and the extreme compassion and sensitivity to life that it conveys, or your observations around that?
Are you asking about cinema in general or his? Oh,
his
this.
and this film. Well, like frame 13 specifically.
Again, these stories are coming from completely different times. Some of them they're joyful, some of them they're not, like number 13 that I mentioned. And I know some of them, I don't know all of them. But if you're talking about cinema and life in general, like all other people, he went through phases. You may or may not know that Taste of Cherry, which is specifically about death, when he made it, he always said that that was a dark time in my life, and I never watched that film again, because that was kind of what he was going through. But then you also have Life and Nothing More and Life Goes On, which is about a huge earthquake that happened in Iran. It was the night of my father's 50th birthday. And my father went there to see what happened, because it happened the location that he made his film before then, Where's My Friend's Home. And he said, I went looking for death and I found life. And you see that life, like it is, and it's everything that you see there, it's almost real. That he said it was the next day, it was during the, it was a football season, like real football, not American football, soccer. And said people, it was the day after the earthquake, and people had lost their families, but at the same time they were trying to tune their antenna to be able to watch the soccer match, football. And he said it many times after that changed his life, the way he looked at death, life, and all of that. Mm-hmm. And you see that in different themes, like there's in The Wind Will Carry Us, again, the theme is death. So, but it's a reporter that goes to document the death of an old woman, but it never happens. And in the process, he sees other things. And
ABC Africa too. I mean,
ABC
there was a commission film. What was the name?
That was about AIDS.
Yes, right. But what was the film really focuses on. I mean, he was commissioned to talk about the AIDS crisis in this specific country, but he focuses a lot on the joy and the pleasure that the people have.
That's where he found digital.
Yeah, that was his
camera.
first digital shoot.
He went to Africa with Samadian, that made 76 minutes. He went there, and they took their handy cams, basically to take notes. But then after he came back, he said, it was so amazing and so moving, I'm going to use that footage. And who cares about the quality? Because the quality was like, this is 2000. Right. This is very early on, bad quality digital handy cam. And said, it doesn't matter. The feeling is there, and that's the important thing. And I cannot recreate that feeling. Right. And so, yeah, he went to make a film about AIDS, but he came back making a film about life in Africa and the way they deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, the perseverance and the way people tried to find joy and pleasure in the midst of this crisis, I think was. Yeah. Another question from the audience. Let's go in the back over here. We're going to bring a mic back to you real quick, so hold on a second.
Thank you very much for sharing this unique, very unique artistic work. I too was very surprised that there were so many crows in most of the frames. And I was wondering if that might have indicated some kind of symbology, if for your father, crows symbolize something. In general, crows can symbolize death because they are attracted to death. Wherever someone's dying, the crows start gathering. The images, all wintry images, was wondering if he was using black and white film, or because of the weather conditions, the images look black and white. And also, I forgot my main question. But go ahead.
Okay, so I think I shared whatever I knew about the crow and the snow, but the part that black and white, he didn't shoot these films. Almost nothing is shot here. Everything, like, he did some green screen from a cat or a bird or something like that, but nothing is shot here. He built this thing like layer by layer by layer. So he chose many of them to be black and white. And I think if you look at his photography, he has a lot of photos in snow, and all of them are black and white as well. And he has a lot of high contrast black and white photos from trees, and he has a series of crows. I don't know where you grew up, but in Tehran, we have a lot of crows, and it's not necessarily death. And I think in different cultures, they have different meanings. Like owl, in Iran, they're a symbol of bad luck, but in the West, it's a symbol of wisdom. But again, the beauty of it is you can have your own interpretation, and it's as good as mine, as good as Paul's.
I really do feel that within the opening, credits where he describes the project, I really read that also as like, come with me on this exploration. Let's see what we can find. I'm fascinated by this. I hope you are too, basically, and saying, come and let's see what we can find together. I mean, I really feel like it's a call to participate in a journey rather than here's what I'm going to show you I found.
Exactly, and I'm happy you saw that because we picked that, obviously, to put it there, to explain a little bit, to prepare people that what they're going to see and then invite them to join us. That's exactly what the intention was, so thank you for that.
That's how I read it. So we have time for one more question. Let me see who we've got here. Let's go for the gentleman here right here in the green shirt. We're going to bring a mic down behind you.
Thank you so much for coming. My understanding is that a lot of your father's catalog was owned by Miramax at some point, and then maybe it got transferred to Weinstein, and I've always been angry. And with what's happened, can you tell us if there's any possibility of just what's going to happen with the U.S. distribution of a lot
This
of
is actually this is the time that I get to
That was my
plug
next
myself
question.
in shamelessly about what we're doing.
This is very exciting.
Yeah.
So go.
One, you're talking about Under the Olive Tree. So Under the Olive Tree, Miramax bought it, but they never showed it. They use it as tax. Taxes they never showed it. Yeah, but 20 years later, the contract was expired, and now actually Criterion, Janus Films, they own the film. The good news is they're restoring all of those films. And the end of this year, they're going to be ready. They're going to show them of those specific, like Trilogy and Under the Olive Trees. But MCADO, after 10 years of negotiation, has finally... MCADO is the French production company that produced most of my father's films, like later films. They bought the rights of all of his old films, so even the short films, 5-minute one, the colors and all of that, they're being restored. And in 2019, in collaboration with Kiarostami Foundation that I've started, we are releasing everything. And Paul just promised to show them at some point.
Oh
here.
my God, if I can't show them, I'm going to
So-
be really upset. But wherever they get to play, I think that's just such a huge, that's so exciting.
And let's use this and say, I hope that Farhang Foundation would help to finance this as well. You hear the people. So hopefully we will show all of his films, including the short films, early films, and later films. It's going to start touring around the world in 2019.
Which is just extraordinary. So I really want to thank you very much for allowing us to show the film and for being here with us. It's just really a treat. Thank you very
It's
much.
great to be here. Thank you. And thank you, everybody.